You're listening to Trademarks Made Easy. Trademarks Made Easy is the podcast focused on helping brand owners in the e-commerce space. With your host, Suzi Hixon, the private label lawyer. But don't worry, you won't find too much legalese here.
Hey there, I'm your host, Suzi Hixon, also known as the Private Label Lawyer. In this episode, I'm going to discuss a few considerations I want you to keep in mind should you be asking yourself whether you should change your brand name. Maybe you've received a cease and desist letter. Maybe you've realized you selected a weak and descriptive trademark. But don't fear, I have a list of pros and cons you should keep in mind when making this analysis. So, are you ready? Here we go. I often get asked by people, do you think I should change my brand name? When I ask why they're considering a brand name change, these are the responses I receive. First of all, people will say, well, I've realized my trademark is too weak, it's descriptive, and it's going to be nearly impossible for me to build strength in it. Makes sense, right? And then another response I often get is that people will say, well, I try to be cute and clever with my spelling, and now I realize I'm shooting myself in the foot because it's going to be really hard for my trademark to appear in voice searches these days. So while I can't advise you without knowing your exact situation, what I can do is share with you the pros and cons of going through a name change and some things that you need to consider. As you are analyzing your own situation, of course, you're going to always need to factor in costs. The biggest concern I've heard from clients about changing their name is that customers already know them by the current name and won't be able to find them. Now, that concern might have made sense 20 years ago, but not as much anymore. With email and website redirects, social media tools, etc., it's super easy to keep your customers in the loop about changes. I actually just sent an email a while ago to about 1,000 people letting them know that they needed to be aware of my upcoming rebrand. I wanted them to just have the heads up, and I wanted to let them know again that over the next several months while these changes are being implemented, they need to know what to expect. So my biggest regret with a name change for a brand has been, I sure wish I would have done this sooner. So it really is never too late to change your brand name. Don't worry about that. But here are some possible downsides that you really need to consider when considering changing your name. First of all, you're emotionally attached to it. Makes sense, right? It happens to the best of us. Another thing that you need to think about, another downside, you might have challenges internally with your company for people to actually get on board with a name change. A lot of people really hate change. Also, you might hurt someone's fees if the person who came up with the original name finds out about your name change. You have to admit you originally selected a crappy name in the first place. Sometimes it's kind of hard to admit when we're wrong. It's okay. There is no way you would have known otherwise unless you've learned this by experience or you've had some type of negative repercussion like receiving a cease and desist letter or getting a refusal to register at the USPTO because the trademark is descriptive and therefore you couldn't enroll it on Amazon's brand registry program. So it's okay to make mistakes in this area because, we just don't know what we don't know, but we're here to learn. Another downside to changing your name, you will need to change your materials, all your ad materials and your collateral and some of your packaging. Yes, this kind of thing needs to be done anyway every few years with branding revamps, so don't get too upset about that. And of course, people will say, oh crap, I have to file a new trademark application. But I will teach you eventually, we'll talk about this, how you can do some of this yourself and hopefully eliminate possible obstacles to registration of your trademark down the road. So there are some pros in selecting a new brand name. Use this as an opportunity to refresh your entire brand as well. And yes, this does include product packaging. And what did I just say a minute ago? A brand revamp is a great idea every so often. You could also use it as an opportunity to reach out to and connect with and engage with your consumers. You'll also save time and save face not having to explain or apologize for a difficult name. Chances are also that you have many more years in business ahead of you than you do behind you. And so having a stronger and a better name is going to only increase your possibility of growth over the long term. And finally, think about this. You have way more possible future customers who don't even know your current name yet, and they'll only know your new name. So that's all for this really short and concise episode. I hope you loved it, and I hope you found it of value. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in my next episode. And remember, never stop learning.
Thanks for listening to Trademarks Made Easy with Suzi Hixon, the private label lawyer. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe anywhere you find podcasts or at theprivatelabellawyer.com.
Remember, the information provided in the Trademarks Made Easy podcast should not be construed as legal advice. It's for informational and entertainment purposes only. It should not be considered a substitute for legal advice. Also, I'm not your attorney. You should engage with an attorney to discuss your specific legal issues. And finally, while I have taken precautions to ensure that the content of my podcast is current and accurate, errors can occur, and thankfully, like us, the laws are ever evolving.